The old man stood silently in the doorway, his trembling hands clutching the edge of a worn-out suitcase. His son's voice echoed through the house, cold, sharp, and final. "Dad, you need to leave. She's right. This is our home now." Those words sliced through the old man's heart like a knife, breaking something deep inside him that had taken a lifetime to build. The faith that his son would always love him back. The dim light flickered across the old man's wrinkled face as he turned toward the door, not saying a word, only letting out a faint sigh, the kind that carries 1,000 memories. Behind him, his daughter-in-law crossed her arms, satisfied. In that single, unbearable moment, love, pride, and family crumbled into silence. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to KindHeartsHub. Let's spread stories that touch the heart and remind us what truly matters. It hadn't always been like this. There was a time when the old man, Samuel, was the pillar of the family, the one who worked through storms and sleepless nights to raise his only son, Michael. Samuel had lost his wife when Michael was still a child. Every night he'd tuck him into bed, whispering prayers that God would help him become a good man, a kind man. And when Michael grew up, got a good job, and married a woman named Clara, Samuel's heart swelled with pride. He thought his struggles had finally borne fruit. He imagined family dinners filled with laughter, love, and gratitude. But life had other plans. Clara was beautiful, intelligent, and confident, but she carried a coldness that Samuel could never quite melt. At first, she tried to hide her irritation at having her husband's father living under the same roof, but slowly it seeped through her words, subtle jabs, sighs of frustration, rolling eyes whenever Samuel tried to help. She complained about his old habits, his village-style manners, and the way he told the same stories again and again. "He's your father, Michael," she would say, "but this isn't a nursing home." Michael, caught between love and guilt, tried to balance both worlds. But as months passed, Clara's discontent became an emotional storm he couldn't handle. Arguments grew more frequent. She'd cry, threaten to leave, say she couldn't live like this. And Michael, desperate to keep his marriage intact, began to see his father not as family, but as the source of all tension. That's when the unthinkable happened. That cold evening when Samuel was asked to leave his own son's home, Samuel didn't resist. He just nodded, packed a few clothes, his Bible, and a photograph of his late wife and son. As he stepped out, the wind howled softly, as if the heavens themselves were mourning. He walked down the street, his shadow long and lonely under the street light. Days turned into weeks. Samuel found a corner in an old church shelter. The priest there gave him food and a cot. He spent his days praying, not for himself, but for his son. Sometimes he'd look at that old photo, touch it gently, and whisper, "He's still my boy, Lord. Please guide him." Meanwhile, Michael's life seemed to return to peace. The house felt quiet, the arguments stopped, and Clara smiled again. But the peace was shallow, a silence filled with unease. Michael would sometimes hear the creak of his father's rocking chair in his mind, the echo of his voice saying grace before meals, the soft hum of the hymns he used to sing. Something in his heart began to ache, but he buried it beneath his work, pretending everything was fine. One night, about a month later, Michael had a dream that shook him to the core. He saw himself walking through a field calling for his father. The sky darkened, thunder roared, and then he saw his father sitting under a tree, frail, silent, his Bible open on his lap. As Michael approached, a figure appeared beside Samuel, a man dressed in white, glowing faintly, his face calm and compassionate. It was Jesus. He looked straight into Michael's eyes and said softly, "You asked for peace, but you cast out the one who gave you love." Then he placed his hand on Samuel's shoulder, and the old man's light faded into the wind. Michael fell to his knees, crying, "Father, forgive me." But the voice that answered him was his own, echoing through the emptiness, "Dad, you need to leave." Michael woke up drenched in sweat, his heart pounding, tears streaming down his face. He couldn't shake off the dream. The next morning he told Clara about it, but she brushed it off as guilt. "You're overthinking," she said coldly. "Your father's fine." But Michael couldn't rest. Something told him he had to find his father, right now. He drove for hours, visiting every shelter, asking people if they'd seen an old man with kind eyes and a weathered Bible. Finally, one caretaker recognized the description. "Yes," he said gently, "he used to stay here, a kind man, always praying for his son. But he fell ill a few days ago. They took him to St. Mary's Hospital." Michael's hands trembled on the steering wheel as he raced to the hospital. When he reached, the nurse led him to a quiet room. There, lying on a thin bed, was Samuel, pale, weak, his eyes closed. The Bible lay on his chest, open to a verse Michael remembered from childhood. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Michael fell to his knees beside the bed, sobbing uncontrollably. Dad, I'm so sorry, he whispered. Samuel slowly opened his eyes, a faint smile forming on his lips. My boy, he murmured, his voice fragile but filled with love. You came. Michael held his father's hand tightly, crying like a child. Please forgive me, Dad, I was blind. Samuel's eyes glistened with tears. I forgave you the moment I left, son. Jesus taught me that love doesn't keep score. It only waits and prays. He reached up weakly and touched Michael's face. Promise me you'll never let pride or fear rule your heart again. Love. That's all that matters. Those were his last words before his hand fell limp, and the monitor beside him went silent. Michael's cry echoed through the sterile room. The man who once taught him how to walk, talk, and pray was gone. All because of one decision made out of fear and pressure. He buried his father beside his mother, under the old oak tree Samuel used to sit beneath on Sundays. On the tombstone, he engraved the words his father lived by, "Love forgives, even when the world forgets." Months passed and Michael's heart never healed the same way. He started going to church again, sitting in the same pew his father once did. He began volunteering at shelters, bringing food and clothes to the old and abandoned. Clara couldn't understand the change in him, his quietness, his faith, his endless compassion. Eventually she left, unable to live with a man whose heart was now filled with something deeper than the world could offer. Michael didn't stop her. He simply whispered a prayer for her too. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Michael stood outside the church with a basket of food for the poor. A young man approached him, tears in his eyes, asking for help. Michael placed a comforting hand on his shoulder and said the same words his father once told him. Son, no one who asks for help is ever alone. Jesus always sends someone, even if it's through us. The young man smiled weakly, and in that moment Michael felt his father's spirit around him, warm, forgiving, proud. He finally understood the lesson Jesus had shown him, that love is not about comfort or convenience, it's about sacrifice, patience, and forgiveness. That the people who raised us carry the face of God in their kindness, and turning them away is like turning away from heaven itself. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to KindHeartsHub. Let's keep spreading stories that remind us of the power of love, family, and redemption. And before you go, comment below. I'll never take my parents for granted again. Let's fill the comments with love and promises to cherish those who gave us everything, even when we gave them nothing in return.